another episode of Vedic Empire Presents. Today, I'm here with my friend and fellow historical and religious researcher, Professor Kalia. And I got to say right off, I have done a lot of research and writing, and some people have even addressed my work as scholarly. But I have to admit, like anyone and everyone, nobody has a full spectrum of all knowledge in the whole creation except the Supreme Lord. And so many times when I'm talking with my friend, Professor Kalia, I'm amazed by the information he has to share on subjects I already thought I was educated on. And so one thing that came up in our discussion recently was the tradition in southwest, what is called, the modern U.S., southwest U.S. regions, the Hopi traditions of Kokopele, and the, what are they called? The divine twins.
Well,
I want to know more about that.
Hero twins, divine twins.
The hero twins, and it's really great. And if I'm correct, they seem to be a direct reflection of the Krishna Balarama legend, pastimes, leelas.
Well, I think that there's definitely parallels. I know other people have pointed this out previously, so I haven't come to this by my own. I've seen other people make these parallels between the Southwest and the Vaishnava tradition with, the flute playing deity and all that stuff. And so we were talking about it before, which is a lot of controversy about Kokopele.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, like we know, right, they always say, well, Kokopele is immediately because they see him as a hunchback and all that stuff. So they immediately compare him with Lord Krishna.
How did you connect hunchback to Krishna?
Well, you were saying it. You already know that. So
you know the
answer to that. Well, you already know the answer to that. That's just the threefold bending form that we were talking about. That Lord Krishna in his different deity forms are famously known for. So that's one of the things that people connect him with. Of course, I was like looking into the Southwest tradition related with the rest of a few other places in North America, and of course, very closely related with, as many of the scholars and whoever the have already pointed out, that it's very closely related with Central America, the Southwest Pueblo tradition.
Are these well-known scholars, or what?
I think they're pretty well-known scholars. I mean, we have, as far as like people who are, written anything, ethnographers, like we have, like I was saying, I was quoting Jesse Walter Fuchs. He was the director of the Bureau of Ethnology, I believe.
What time period? Yeah.
It was the late 1900s until
1800s. You mean?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
1800s.
Yeah. We're late
19th century
guys, man.
Right. So yeah, and that's why I'm not a mathematician. Anyway, so. He was one. There's so many other names. We get I don't have my notes, so I can just name people like Dorsey and
But people in the top of their field who are taking first-hand recordings and interviewing these ancient elders.
Right. Yeah. Walters, he's always considered one, but because some of these people, they're not quoting they're actually, what do they say? The text to it, the subtitle to it, the actual author to it is usually some Native American. We have stories like from Frank Goldtooth. I'm trying to say Buffalo Grass. I can't remember his Hopi name, but it's something like Totsohi, which is buffalo grass. Things like this. So they have a lot of this inside information. And even though there's variations in the story and all this stuff, you get a lot of ideas.
Which you find in the Vedic stories too.
What's that?
Variations.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, basically you have the flute playing deity. So here's Kokopele. Yeah. And people say, well, they identify Kokopele, and you find that I'm not an expert on everything here, but I definitely know Southern California, Arizona, probably the surrounding areas like that in northern Mexico. Right. You're going to find images. I believe California has one of the largest. You've seen that one?
No.
You know what I mean? Oh, it's a giant.
Kokopele.
It's a giant Kokopele glyph that you
engraving
from the air. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but they have different explanations of who Kokopele is.
So just in short, though, the information you're accessing is from the top of the line reputable researchers who are undoubtedly the top of their field, and they're confirming the hero twins legends from within the tradition, so we can take that information.
Okay, now you have, these are Paul Reed, and some of the, probably one of the first two that come to mind are I believe, Albert Mitral. He did on South America. Paul Reed, he was the one who quoted, the hero twins can be found from the very tip of North America, which is Alaska, to the
Tiera Del Fuego.
Right, to the southern tip, and from the Atlantic to the Pacific.
Wow.
So it's pretty much a pervading, what they call
not like an isolated myth.
Yeah, it's not isolated at all. So it's pretty much a pervading, what he calls a pervading myth. He says it is actual. He says it's anyway, in my own words, what he's saying basically, it's it's actual true religion of the Native Americans. It's not at all like. And so another thing is Mitral. He does a lot of it, for South America, and he's like really pointing this out. Also, that the traditions are there, the hero twins are there. One of the probably most well-known themes about that is from the Mayan, the Quiche Maya, the Popol Vuh, where you have both of the twins, Hunafu and Xibalenque, and then that's featured all throughout Mexico, Central America, and different versions of all types of different versions that were like, I guess you might say Christianized versions of the son, the Christ who becomes the son. Anyway, the younger brother,
son or the son,
the younger brother who was our Father in heaven, who became Christ, who became the Son.
Like the father to son.
Yeah, the father to son. So the son is directly related with how they look at God. They're looking at God and the Son deity as, we have this direct relation. I mean, not to say that the other moon doesn't get, but just for instance, so this relationship between Central America and Southwest Pueblo is well connected. I mean, we have the macaw feathers, which are one thing. They're native to Central America, but they're used in the Southwest Pueblo and for the different deities. And they actually have
macaw is like type of parrot.
Yeah, the type of parrot that's well known in the Mayan and Aztec, and but it's also used, as I said, in Western Pueblo traditions. You have the deities. You have lots of images of the macaw in their potteries and things like this. So it's like they have this really close relation.
Yeah.
And anyway, so the deity there is, we were talking about Kokopele. Just getting back to that idea. And Kokopele, as far as I know, like I say, if anyone's out there and they know better, well,
leave a comment.
Right, we're up for it, you know what I mean? But as far as I understand, Kokopele is a deity. Now, I know that the stories of Kokopele are related with the Corn Maidens, the Corn Mothers. And one of them is a sacrifice of the Corn Mothers. And, this sacrifice is something that you're going to see that happens from the north and east down to the... anyway, that's a whole other subject about Corn Mother.
Yeah, so before we continue, I was wondering, because... with us with a background in Vaishnavism, for us, when you say hero twins, we know the connection, obviously, Krishna and Balarama. And so for people who aren't familiar with that, can you give us a little background?
I was coming to that point. Okay. The flute-playing deity.
Krishna is a flute-playing deity, for those who don't know.
Well, the flute-playing deity, Lord Krishna, yes. Lord Krishna's names are...
Murli-Dar, Amshi-Dar.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have, with the flute. So he's
the flute holder.
Right. He's the holder of the flute, all this stuff. It's pretty well known, you know. But the idea of that, the black and blue color is there also.
That's Krishna.
Right. Well, yeah.
And what's the color of the other twin in the hero twins, the American Indian tradition?
Well, we have different. Anyway, we can get into that. First, I want to just say about.
Okay. Yeah.
First, I wanted to say about. I got off.
Well, Krishna and Balaram, they appear time and again. Ram and Lakshman, Krishna and Balaram, and most people assume this is like some kind of ethnic East Indian Hindu thing that was invented by some guys in a cave who took mushrooms or whatever.
Oh! This is what I want to say. Right.
But we find Krishna and Balaram all over the world.
Okay. Well. Oh my God. What was it?
Jai Saraswati Ma, bless us with the wisdom.
Hold on a second. We can stop there. We can stop. Continuing on, I was just going to say that. Okay, we're on. Okay. Okay. This is not something I came up with. This is something that I have seen compared by different, scholars, anthropologists, ethnologists that came before, And I guess back in that time, there was like this kind of idea that they were connected, but I believe it was discouraged, and ultimately kind of like dropped off.
You mean post-Columbus discouraged?
Right, there was a lot of, back in you have the whole thing with, who's Horatio Hale, you've heard of him, who wrote the Iroquois Confederacy and all this stuff, and he was, you can see his writing was real positive about the idea of the connections and stuff that he had seen and things like that.
Yeah.
And so were Jesse Walter Fuchs, as I mentioned already, about the Hopi and all these things. And one thing he did comment on, this is why we're talking about Kokopele.
Yeah.
Because people we say, Kokopele is the guy with the feathers and he's dancing and stuff. But as far as I see on the research go, not all the Native Americans agree that Kokopele is a flute player.
Oh, interesting.
A lot of them say, well, he's a mosquito and this is the thing, or some people will say this, or he's using, and there's different stories like that. So, and so it's kind of controversial whether that, but at the same time, I have seen that the Kokopele, the Katsina form of the Kokopele, is a black.
What's Katsina again?
Katsina is it's a deity.
Deity.
It's a deity.
It's a Hopi tradition.
It's in a Hopi tradition, but the Katsina, or Kachina, however you want to call it, he's representative of that deity, and he usually comes in a ceremony, which they call the Katsina dance, or they usually also very well known, probably more famously known as the Katsina dolls.
Yeah.
As we all know about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
don't they call him a trickster too?
Yeah, he's a trickster deity. He's related with the, and that's why I think he's related with the Clown Society. I'm not too clear on that, so if anyone knows, let us know.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, I understand that he does have those relationships with the Corn Maidens and everything. And
so is he different than the hero twin? Is there a connection between the hero twins and Kokopele?
Well, because he's not named as a flute-playing deity. He's painted black usually. He has these stripes, vertical stripes. He's usually considered a sort of clown. It's like that. And then you have the actual flute youth, who is called, I believe the Hopi name, as far as I can pronounce it, is called something like Lenyamana, and his elder brother Tuamana. So you have the snake youth and flute youth, and as the Jesse Walter Fuchs, as we once said, the Bureau of Ethnology at the time, head of the director, pointed out that this was the core of the Hopi Confederacy, the
Yeah.
relationship of these two brothers and their two wives.
Oh.
And but he said it might have been disputed, but basically his understanding was this was a major,
So would it be a stretch to say the flute youth is a representation of Krishna, the flute player,
Well,
and the snake youth is represented Balaram, who's the divine serpent?
well, I would say that there are definitely parallels there. I'm not going to say that because
were they worshipped as divinities?
If I say representative of them,
Yeah.
I'm going to say they're just the same deities. But if I say representative of them, it seems as I'm saying that somehow it originated in one part of the world. When I don't believe that at all. I believe that it's like, okay, well, this thing is so ancient that it goes back in such ancient time.
And those were real beings that were experienced by
Right.
the natives there.
And so,
yeah, that's a huge point.
Even if it's only like, if we're talking about 5,000 years ago, which people dispute whether that's the time that Lord Krishna appeared or whatever like that, yet we have too many similarities to, that they're hard to deny that there's, and like I said, I am not the first person to come up with these ideas. A lot of people notice these connections between the East and the West. They did write about them. They did mention them. I mean, and I've noticed that in other places where you see that with, people back in the colonial times in Africa. They were talking about, there's some similarities here, and they compare that. But ultimately, they write it off.
Yeah,
as well,
that happened in India too. Like
right.
if you go to the earliest researchers in India, they're like totally positive and felt that they were getting enlightened by the Vedic wisdom. And then suddenly there's like this axe went down and said, no, you're going to learn all this stuff in order to discredit it.
Right.
Well, that happened. So you're saying that happened globally, not just.
Well, I've seen it where they like one. I noticed one reverend's book I was reading, which is a kind of typical thing. He made all kinds of comparisons of Africa. And he said, yes, there's some similarities here, and somehow they are similar, and so on and so on.
Similarities to what?
Well, he was talking about other, European languages, Indian languages, things like this, oceanic. He was making comparisons with all these different, kind of things, Malay, and, and he was saying, there's definitely something here, but he's like saying, ultimately, because of the time that, the pressure was, you know what I mean? Anyway, so we know the story behind that. But back to Kokopele and the Flute youth.
Yeah.
Okay. But these guys didn't write it off like that. I mean, you can see his idea was, in other words, you can see his idea was like, hey, I really know there's something here. But officially, I have to make a statement that it's not connected.
Oh, weird.
So and so he wrote this long thing in his dictionary about it. And his mentality was like, yes, there seems like officially, we can't recognize it, So I mean,
and all this stuff's publicly available, right?
Right. It's public.
Oh, great.
And but a lot of these people, they didn't actually put it to the, like. I don't think Fuchs was just there, kind of the observer. And he said, now, we have to go to the maiden here because we have to mention her because this is important. Anyway, it was his idea, Fuchs, Jesse Wilbur Fuchs.
Was there a central maiden figure?
Yes, and this is why, because the flute youth was related to these two maidens. And as the story goes, Chuatio, who's called the youth, because the name Tio, I believe, is the name youth. And Chua, like they say. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that means the serpent.
Oh, wow.
So he's the one who originally goes down the Colorado River to the ocean. He meets the great serpent. He gives him two wives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he's called the ancestral hero, cross-cultural hero of the Hopis. Like that. I mean, I guess he's mentioned. I don't know, but in this. As far as I understand, you know what I mean. And so he comes back with these two wives, and they're two maidens, snake maidens, and they're able to, create rain and things like this, and so that's prosperity. Basically, they're like we can make a comparison of Lakshmi Devis.
Oh, wow.
You know, they're kind of like that because of, you know, give prosperity, they give rain,
fortune,
right,
prosperity.
like this. And so he, according to this version, he gives the other maiden to his younger brother, who's a flute youth, and he's a snake youth. Now, there's several different versions. I can't go into it, but basically the idea is here the snake youth goes into after having the 7 serpents, right? So we're talking about the maiden. The maiden's important because Flute is noticing on the ceremonies, these 4 different maidens from these 4 different tribes, they all have the same markings of the flute maiden and the snake maiden.
Oh.
You know, and
so the snake and flute maidens both have the same markings?
Right, and he's different, and he says, and they have the same markings as the germ goddess. And the germ goddess is the corn goddess.
Germ? Like I thought germs weren't discovered.
No. You know what I'm saying. German.
German.
Yeah, Austrian. No, not Austrian. No. Deutschland.
Oh, okay. Germanic.
Motherland.
Germanic.
We were talking about. No. Germ goddess. The corn maiden.
Germinating, you mean?
Yeah, germinating.
Oh, sprouting.
Right.
God, man, English language is like so many meanings to the same damn word.
Yeah, so the corn goddess. So she's the same. So in this 7 serpents bone, and then in the Central America, you have the goddess called Chicomiquat with 7 serpents. And you see her picture. You've seen that picture with her 7 heads and stuff like that, serpent heads and things like that. But in Father Fray Bernardino Sahagún, if I'm saying that correctly.
Oh, he was way
not.
Back, right? 1600s?
He was back during this conquest era.
Yeah,
he
conquistador era.
He was probably one of the most...
Oh, that was 1500s.
Most well-known chroniclers of that time. He's...
Wasn't he one of the first Spaniards to actually sympathize and set up that campaign to stop massacring the natives?
Florentine Codex, that's what his codex.
Yeah.
Florentine. And the Florentine Codex is it's written with the native Nahuatl next to the, anyway.
Nahuatl is like a native Mexican.
Aztec, it's what you call Aztec language, or what do you say, the Toltec, Otomi is what your friend was saying, you know. But, so in there, you see, I don't know what you're saying about it. The 7 serpents, and he shows her there in the pictures. I mean, whoever the native artist was to do the codex, you know.
Oh, wow.
And you can see that she's...
So this codex was pre-Spanish that somehow survived the iconoclastic destruction of ancient...
Well, it wasn't exactly pre-Spanish because it was done... Yes, it's kind of like it's considered almost pre-Spanish. It's not it's Florentine Codex, but it was directed by Sahagún. To do this.
That's almost a Sanskrit name, Sahagún.
Right. So anyway, anyway, you can see that she's seated upon that serpents. She's the goddess worshipped as the grain goddess, the food goddess, the goddess of all this stuff. Corn, basically corn mother. Her image, you can see sometimes she's got the 7 serpents, sometimes she's got the 7 corns. So she, so this is the same thing with the in the Hopi, in the story you have from Fuchs. He's giving about the birth of the 7 serpents from the wife, and it says Fuchs right there says he makes comment that he says so she gave birth to 7 serpents, and they started to disturb people. So the elder brother and the wife went off, and I guess basically left the.
So is the snake hero twin older than the flute player twin?
What's that?
They're considered twins, but like with Krishna and Balarama,
Balaram's
older than
he's
Krishna.
the elder brother, right?
Oh,
his
wow.
younger brother.
Come on, guys. It's like the same thing.
Right. So he's his elder, that's his younger brother. Yeah, and he's painted blue in his Katsina form. You'll see he's always usually turquoise
So the
color.
flute player twin is blue.
Yeah, he's Katsina. Anyone can see him. There's tons of them everywhere. So you can see he's painted blue in a Katsina form. He's got the three different tree color feathers or flowers or within his, and he's the same as the deity called Payatamus. He also has the three things going on, usually turquoise. He's the Lord who goes into the sun. That's why it's important to understand the context between the sun deity as seen as the solar deity with the supreme deity, as they consider. Because if you have the Central American narratives that are coming from this time, from the time of Popol Vuh, and kind of like, and a lot of them were...
What era was the Popol Vuh?
The Popol Vuh was around, I would say about 16th century.
So 1500s.
1500s,
Okay.
right. And it was, once again, kind of like, but there's many different, as you can see, the ascent of the two twins into the sun and the moon. And sometimes I get that wrong. It's not, as far as I can see in the Popol Vuh, it's not mentioned which twin goes into what. But there's a lot of evidence to show that it's usually the first twin that goes to the sun, the second twin that goes to the moon a lot of times. But
so is that
I'm not saying that's good.
Right? Don't mainstream scholars
No.
say Krishna's like solar deity, Balaram's like a lunar deity, isn't there?
Well,
There's
you're
another
right.
parallel
There's
there.
but but that's one.
Nityananda, moon, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sun,
Right.
yellow, Krishna,
Right.
white,
Right.
Balaram.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know too much about. Anyway, I won't say anything about that. But yeah, right. The moon, the sun, and as we know, the Greek always has the idea of the sun deity related with, you know what I mean?
Helios and Zeus.
Right.
Krishna, like every god
And,
divinity is like identified by mundane scholars as a solar deity.
And-
Even Jesus.
right,
You know?
and so many of the stories are involved of. I mean, I've seen them ascending into the sun in several different places, or sun and the moon in several different places. So anyway, and also one thing I have to mention is that the two hero twins in the Popol Vuh are flute players.
Oh, wow.
Their brothers are Hunbats, Hunsolds. These are the two monkey deities
Oh.
who are also artists and flute players. Their fathers, who are martyred at a certain point in the story, that's one Hunapu and 7 Hunapu. They're also flute players. So you have this repeating idea coming from the Popol Vuh, and then in California you have what's called the flute lore body, and you have this repeating idea there again. You have it again where the fathers are also flute players and the heroes of the story, or sometimes the singular hero of the story, but they're also flute players. So you have a lot of the flute. I mean, this goes all the way up to. We can say that the idea of the northeastern, I'm going to say Olum, Ojibwe, I believe, Algonquian, I'm going to say, have the same idea of the deities, the flute-playing deity.
So these are all different ethnic groups amongst the American Indians.
Like Hiawatha, who's the guy, Wadwords,
Longfellow,
right? Palm or something.
Last of the Mohicans.
Right. It features this deity called Chibiabos, along with Hiawatha and all that stuff. And he's the great flute-playing deity that everything steals from, everything stops from. And he becomes like the Lord of the Souls and stuff, because usually the narrative goes that he's either taken by the Manitous underwater, he's drowned underwater, he goes, all these different narratives talk about how he either goes underwater, drowned underwater by different forces, and he comes back as the Lord of Souls.
Wow.
So
for those who don't know,
and that's what the name means, Chiviobos.
Lord of Souls.
Lord of Souls. And he's also called Kiopata. Kiopata is, right, and he's
What's Kiopata?
Kiopata is his name, well, he's in the spiritual world. And Chibiobos is his manifestation.
In the
here,
material
that's what they
world,
call
Earth.
it.
So for those who don't know, Lord Krishna is very well known for playing the flute, obviously. But when he plays the flute, the creation is stunned, the deer is freeze.
Right. And that's exactly how Wadworth's poem, it describes that.
Wow.
His flute playing is so great. So that's, you also have Glusklap, Polskabe, whatever, the different names going further.
So if this was just invented from the minds of some ancestral tribal guy, why did he choose a flute?
Right.
If it was just made up, he could have chosen a drum, or something.
But it's not just the flute. It's not just the idea of flute playing deity. It's just the fact that it's that you have, and this is what has been pointed out by Radin and other people, that, they've all noticed these obvious, connections, that it's the same idea of religion, because the flute playing deity is like, as with I want to say who's really called Gluskop, or Kloskerbe, and the great nephew.
What language is that?
I want to say it's I want to say it's on the Algonquin languages, or not. I'm trying to. Anyway.
Well,
I don't have my notes.
Yeah. So what are you saying?
But I know it's northeast.
Okay.
Anyway, you got me.
Gluskop.
Yeah. Kloskerbe. I want to say these names. I know they become in the Penobscot, but it's not just Wampanoag.
Yeah,
Wampanoag, and those kind of related, I believe, is what I'm trying to. And they have. Anyway, if I get too much into this, it's just too much. But but anyway, here he's also got the flute. He's got the flute playing. He's a whole flute playing deity thing, and it's going on. The great nephew comes, helps him out. The main thing I'm talking about here, though, is the relationship with the great nephew and the first woman, and how she sacrificed herself. She's once again the corn goddess, and you can see that it goes on and on. And
so, what parallel do we have to Vedic goddess sacrificing herself?
Well, you can probably say more about, but you have it also Cherokee, right?
Yeah.
Cherokee, here we say, right? In the Cherokee, she's called Selu, Kanati and Selu. They're two sons of the Twin Thunders. So as you can see, it just keeps the idea of the two twin sons sacrificing a mother is going here, and then it happens again in the Cherokee. The Twin Thunders sacrifice their mother. But in the end of the story, they see she's alive and well. So she just tells them, you have to drag me across the field. I mean, this is one of the, and it also happens in the, kind of like in the Southwest when you have Kokopele, when the goddesses, well, I want to say goddesses, but the story is the women of the village sacrifice themselves, and they all turn to grains and food and all these things. And this story is pretty pervading.
Interesting.
It's like, and so you can see that's who the mother goddess is. And it's
almost like mothers sacrifice themselves to have children.
Right.
In every life form we have.
But like I said, in the story, the Cherokee story, as far as I can see, she's at the end of the whole saga, right? If you want to say, the adventures of the Twin Thunders, because they're the two most powerful beings.
So are they the hero twins of the Southwest?
They're the same hero twins, I believe. I mean, there's no other explanation, because it fits the whole model, especially the sacrifice thing of the mother. As you can see, that's part of the whole, thing that goes on.
Yeah, because that whole agricultural thing is so tied into Krishna and Balarama.
Yeah, you know that. But I just want to mention that.
Yeah.
Before I forget. Yeah, so at the end, they see her. She's well. In other words, the sacrifice is superficial. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like she's, completely
dead and gone.
Right. And she appears well with her husband, Kanati, was supposed to. Anyway, so that's Cherokee story that I know. I mean, there's other stories like that. Anyway, so getting back to the idea of Kokopele, you see that, thing where the village ladies sacrifice themselves. A lot of times you have to understand that story is, also the Corn Maidens sacrificing themselves. And the Corn Maidens are usually dancing with the flute. who's Tava. I've seen the Corn Maidens dancing and Payatamu as well. So the Tava is the sun god now, and that's the Hopi sun deity. And I can see anyway, I don't want to go into it, but
So how does the dancing maidens connect to the Krishna and Balarama?
because Krishna is always dancing, we see, Anna's walking on
With the Gopi maidens?
Yeah, he's always dancing with the Gopi maidens. We've heard about the Rhodes, circus dance, circle
dance.
Siklos, the Kiklos,
The chakra,
the
circle.
Right.
the kalaka,
Choreography,
the kalak,
chorus,
choreographer,
right,
choreographers.
and kore are related with those. So those are the
Wow.
and divine dancers and stuff. So you have it's pretty much the same kind of idea. I'm not going to say that exactly the same, but it's pretty much like the deity likes to dance with the maidens in the southwest. The deity is generally a turquoise color in the southwest. If not, in the hero twins of the Hopi. See, you have the hero twins of the Hopi, and you have once again commentary by Jesse Walter Fuchs, talking about the relationships of the two hero twins. Now here we have one, and he talks about, and that's a pole on mass right there, but the two deities known as it's been a while. Anyway, the two hero twins in the Hopi, and one is a black color. Again, if you move to the
Krishna is often black as well.
Right. Yeah. But that's what you have in Tezcatlipoca. Now, I've seen this where people have compared Tezcatlipoca to Krishna.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so
it's not just us in here in psychedelic outfits.
Right, because he's a flute playing deity. He's a black color. He's I guess it's you call it something that's related. His stone, his emblem was the obsidian, and polished mirror. The polished mirror stone was supposedly related with the temples where Tezcatlipoca was worshipped. And he's a dark deity. Now, in place of that worship, as we know, at least in 3 different histories of the area of ancient Tenochtitlan, which was
that's where Mexico City is now.
That's where Mexico City. We have 3 different. The Black Christ, which is one is in the main metropolitan cathedral in Mexico City.
Oh, really?
And we have a few in the surrounding areas, and those stories are confirmed that there was the deity of Tezcatlipoca who was worshipped in that area.
And they changed him to the Black Christ.
Interesting. So at least
was that a co-opt maneuver, or they actually recognized Christ?
I think it might. If it's not true, it's highly believed, because till this very day, you're going to see, well, at least as far as the last time I checked, they still had festivals.
To this modern era.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Aztec reenactment festivals, dressed like and worship Tezcatlipoca, and of course Huitzilopochtli, whose appearance day is December 25th.
Really?
Also, is Hunahpu's was also considered to be, which is the other Mayan hero twin. His appearance day, his ascendance day to the sun, was considered to be December 25th.
So wouldn't the cynical mind say that was just the Catholics trying to convert people easier?
Right, but
so they co-opted it rather than actually recognizing the sacredness of the tradition?
And they
what do you think?
I was just trying to finish up my train of thought here. What I'm saying, how they celebrate in Mexico City and I guess other places around Mexico, and they have these traditional dress and stuff, and where they parade Black Christ. And sometimes they'll parade an image. And I noticed of Huitzilopochtli, the left-handed, who's a turquoise lord of the, anyways.
So is that turquoise lord and the black lord recognized as one?
He's called the blue Tezcatlipoca, and by certain standards. In other words, we have different, I guess, Spanish chronicles that came out at the time. To, you know, I mean Aztec, I guess, Mixtec. I mean this kind of Nahuatl
Mystic
ideas of, you know, and I guess one of the major explanations that I've understood is that here we have Tezcatlipoca as the original deity. Smoking mirror is a name. He's a dark color, like a smoky mirror.
And he has a brother that's light complexion,
and
white.
his name is, and that's the white Tezcatlipoca, and that's Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl is more like Balaram than Krishna?
He's the Ista.
Oh, that's why he always has a serpent connection.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
And so that's why
and that's why he's called Ista, because he's a white color. So that's why it's called a white. But also, you'll see Quetzalcoatl sometimes in some of the Codex paintings. He's a black color.
Oh.
And it's a black Quetzalcoatl too. It's not like that.
Oh, really? I mean, God, he can be any color he wants, you know. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So Quetzalcoatl like that. So and then they have the blue. That's Huitzilopochtli, left-handed hummingbird, or some people translate hummingbird of the south. Oh. Now the hummingbird, that's a whole separate.
Hey, before we get into hummingbirds, I think we need to talk about serpents.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that's a whole separate subject because it's in depth to go into the stories of the hummingbird and how
I love it. I love hummingbirds. Actually, my favorite bird.
Anyway, so he's considered anyway. And the red Tezcatlipoca.
Oh, wow.
That's the other one. We call sometimes I think they call him Zipitopec, the Flute deity. I believe he's considered to be like the Earth Lord or something.
Flayed, like
Flayed,
like Christ.
Yeah. Wow. Deity with the flayed skin.
Interesting.
Yeah. And anyway, so that's the idea. And he's a flute playing deity, chroniclers, especially Sahagún, Ran, chronicled Tezcatlipoca's impersonator. And not to get into the idea of the sacrifice, because that's contested. And I don't know whether, I'm not going to get into that subject. But basically, the impersonator was painted black color. He was taught how to play the flute.
Impersonator?
Yeah, he would impersonate Tezcatlipoca.
Oh.
He was, like I said, he was taught how to play the flute. And
you mean in the legends or some human
guy? No, during the
festival.
He was considered a living representative of the deity. He wasn't a king or anything. He was just a slave or somebody they picked and thought. And they had a certain criteria that they could, this guy had to be free of blemishes and free of these type of defects and so on and so on. Had to be youthful because you see the name Tepochtli and all that coming up for Tezcatlipoca as well as Quetzalcoatl, which means the youth. So they were always called youthful. So many epaulettes. Sahagún gives in his Florentine Codex, Tezcatlipoca is compared to Jupiter or Zeus because they didn't want to compare him to Jehovah.
Oh, Jehovah.
Because it would mean like the Christians would be admitting
they already got it going on.
Right.
Why should they listen to us?
Right. So he's considered all around in this sense to be the supreme deity, at least in that area. He was. And the impersonator was dressed like that. He was painted black. He was taught to play the flute. He did have a pipe that he would smoke, a tobacco pipe and stuff, and he had a mirror because the smoking mirror was a symbol of the. He was.
So it wasn't tobacco like incense more than just
right. He had golden ankle bracelets. He was put with that, golden arm bracelets. He was given this flower garlands to wear and a crown of feathers. And I've read different descriptions for different people. Some will have supposedly described a deity that was existing at one time in certain places, and said they were covered with jewels and big gems and things like this, and you know what I mean. I'm not going into all that, but very elaborate, or he was, they had so this was the impersonator. For a whole year, according to, the chroniclers, he would go around and get tribute from the people, and he would be the
So is that similar to the
deity.
Devi goddess tradition in Nepal?
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
For a year, the girl is
yeah.
chosen to be a living rep of the goddess. Wow.
So he would be that. But you can tell by how they, that he was definitely a flute-playing deity. So we have this connection from the Mayan, which is Hunapu. So we were talking about the two brothers, Ipalenque and Hunapu, who ascend to the sun and the moon. Then we come to the Aztec, where we have, and this is not, you can see this, it's not my idea, because people already compare the two, Hunapu to Tezcatlipoca. They say the first deity, Hunapu, who they consider means first lord. I've seen it say first reed, but most scholars have kind of rejected that idea. I don't want to argue with anyone, but and say, no, this is first lord. And they're a little bit questionable, though, about the name of Zivalenque. And I've seen one that actually said mighty, Zivalenque, which is like, anyway, Jaguars is the name they give for him, though, But anyway, those are the two brothers. And so if you're comparing those two brothers together, you're going to see, okay, well, that must equal who is frequently considered Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl, who are usually seen together, and in many cases they're considered even twins, So, and of course, Quetzalcoatl's form of the serpent, right? And so we have to go back to Southwest again. We see again the serpent, the seven serpents, and it's just because we see the colors, especially, the dark deity. And then we see the deities like the Zuni, Payatamu, and Payatamu, how he's described. And you can usually see the deity has these, just like the Hopi deity, he has these flowers, I guess, what do you call them, on his head. And usually it's the three flowers. It's like 1, 2, 3. And the Hopi deity, the Flute deity, always has the three flowers on top of his head. And so you can see it, but he's described as a young youth, that he's handsome and beautiful, and he attracts the Corn Maidens. And
with this flute playing.
Right, with this flute playing. And this is the idea behind Tava, the sun god. Now, we haven't got into the sun god and how they're related directly in the Southwest, but this is time. But anyway, just to say that, so he dances with the maidens, he plays the flute. That's also his big thing. You know what I mean? He's pretty much the same idea. In fact, there's one story, and I'm trying to remember who's the person who recorded this story, of the Mukwe and the, basically the Zuni and the Hopi go into the same cave, and they see
they call them kivas, right?
Well, they say kivas. That might be kivas, but supposedly this is some cave that had a mystical river and a mist that was a mystical rainbow, that would...
inside the cave?
Right. To get to the cave, you had to go through this kind of, you know what I mean? And then there was Payatamu in there, according to the Zuni. And the Hopi call the same deity, the Lenya, I want to say the Lenya Dio, but anyway, the music lord. So they both considered the same deity, their same deity, by these two different names, according to this. And so Payatamu dances with the maidens, it's got his, it mainly, what I understand is the flute youth is with the flute maiden, and generally speaking, you hear about Tava, he's a sun deity. We're going to get it anyway. Payatamu dances with the maidens, he does all that stuff, and then, in one place, Payatamu enters the sun. Now he becomes a sun deity, and you're going to see that the flute deity is a turquoise color. Now look at the other deity, he's called Tava, the Katsina form. You're going to see he's a turquoise color. These markings are pretty much identical to those of the flute youth. He holds also sometimes the cone or in his one hand and the flute, or the rattle in his one hand and the flute in the other, or something like that. So he's pretty much identical with the flute youth in many aspects, except that he has the solar mask, the radiating eagle feathers that they use in also the dances. You'll see them in there, and and he's also the turquoise color. His markings are a little bit different, but not much different. Now you're going to go back to Sahagun in his codex again. You're going to see this Aztec image with the radiating feathers for the sun deity worship like that too. So it's not, and so the Navajo. Now people say, well, the Navajo are Athabascan and they're considered like separate, but they've been there long enough that their traditions are pretty much in line with all the Pueblo ideas, and so they have who's called the turquoise boy. And not to go into, there's a lot to be said about this. I just want to briefly say that. So in the narratives, you're going to see turquoise boy is given a 12-hole flute, and he enters the sun. And then there's a prayer for the turquoise boy. He says, well, now that I'm entering the sun, and of course it's either white shell woman or white shell man or something like that who enter the moon. And they're also giving the 12-hole flute. So here we have the flute players in the Navajo, and that's just to get into a little bit of it, because there's more to it than that, but just to get into the basic idea, and they enter the sun. And so now he's saying, okay, now I require sacrifice from everybody. From all living beings, they'll have to give their lives that I'm like that. And it's been interpreted as, okay, well, this is when people start sacrificing. But no, this is before time began. So when time begins now people have lifespans and all this. So this is what he means by the sacrifice. Because as you can see in so many other narratives in the Southwest, this deity is entering the sun, and this is before time begins. In the Popol view, it's kind of like the same idea as you have all these different creators, along with Tepu and the plumed serpent, before time begins. So this is all before the beginning of time. And so what sounds like a sacrifice, like he's actually demanding, which people have said, oh, he's demanding a sacrifice. No, this is just the beginning of time. When mortality
so
has
isn't that
now
also
come into
the
existence.
creation of Purusha, self-sacrifice?
No, it's just the beginning of time when mortality now comes into existence. Now that the sun is created, it's just like they say, Kalo Chakra, so it's just a thing that's moving and counting all the days. Right, it's a wheel of time. And so the days are numbered for the living entities. And every living entity now, but before the sun is created, before the moon is created, this is before time begins, and this is with the idea is pretty, pervasive, as I say, from Central America, and so this is Navajo idea. This is when time begins, so on, such, and that. So yeah, and as you can see, turquoise boy once again, turquoise color. Right, it's so much. Just keep it, and he enters the sun, and this is where he gets. Again, we have Payatamu. The sun shell is created. He enters the sun. He becomes Oshta Payatamu, which means now he's a solar youth. Payatamu simply means youth, just as Tio simply means youth. In the Hopi, and we have turquoise boy, and what does boy mean? Well, it means someone young, so they're all youth, and this is consistent, as we see from Quetzalcoatl.
So they never select Turkish grandpa or anything.
No, that's why even going back all the way to Central America and the Christianized narratives, like the Chol narratives of our Father, our Holy Father, our Heavenly Father, who is the Son, who is the younger brother, who is the Son, who is the Christ. So this is basically the idea behind it. The younger brother, who is the Son, who is the Christ. Because you get a lot of these stories of the younger brother, and they're pretty much Mother Mary and so on, and the younger brother fights off all the other brothers, and they turn into pigs like they do in the Popol Vuh. They turn into monkeys.
What story is that from?
What's
the
that?
Mother Mary you mentioned, turning into...
Well, those are like, I can name probably one of them right now, and that's the troll.
No, but when you said Mother Mary.
Yeah, Mother Mary.
Oh, they added her to the...
Right, and when they become Christianized, you can see there's the same stories from the Popol Vuh. Same idea with the brothers getting turned into monkeys, or getting turned into pigs, or getting... But the younger brother is the one who ascends, and he becomes the Christ, and he becomes the Son. So he enters the Sun. So this is their relation with the Sun, which is, like I said, is pervasive. You're gonna see all these deities or young deities, and they're involved with being a solar deities, and you can. But this is just to kind of certify that how they're seeing it is not like, okay, these are two random deities. These deities we're equating with Christ. These deities we're equating with, you know what I mean?
No, I don't.
So, yeah.
Hey, pause for a sec.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah, it's like too long, but this is good. Hey, so what I wanted to do now...
So, Mr. Brannon Parker, you were talking about the fear, I guess, the like polarization, what do you say, the demonization of the serpent throughout the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions, and why isn't it in other places of the world, I guess is what we trying to get at, is that we find the serpent is not considered like
sacred and godly. Yeah, and it's like quite interesting because we all know, like, you go online, any forums, and then people have this fear of the serpent, and then the religious-minded will immediately go to the Garden of Eden, right? So I just thought, I wanted to read some quotes, and these are totally authoritative from the Judeo-Christian perspective, and I believe Islamic because it's the Old Testament. And what do we have here? It says, in yet another instance where we find the ancient Judaic use of sacred carven images can be found in the Old Testament. And quote from the Old Testament, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made a serpent of brass, and he put it on a pole. And it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld that serpent of brass, he was healed and he lived." And why do we go to every doctor's office or pharmacy? What do they have as their symbol? The sacred serpent on the staff of Moses. Right? And it's just amazing how it's part of their own tradition at the deepest level that they always just go to the Garden of Eden, the evil serpent, right? But not only that, if you want to, so continuing, Moses made a copper snake, and he put it on a pole to demonstrate to the people that they could be saved from the plague of snakes if they raised their eyes to heaven, after having basically darshan, a vision of that deity of the serpent. And then you want to go to the New Testament of Christ, and direct words of Lord Jesus Christ. What does he say? "Just as Moses lifted up the copper snake in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life."
Amen to that.
Yeah, so I mean, what more sacred connotation can you have with the sacred divine serpent from the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition than this? It's not like I made this up. I'm quoting the Bible.
Yes, John 3:14, 15.
Oh, great. Yeah, so the evidence is right there. So as Professor Kalia is going and repeatedly talking about the serpent of the sacred hero twins, and the flute player one and the serpent one, and just get it in your hearts that all serpent symbolism in religion is not demonic. It's not the reptilian conspiracy or any of that. It's actually sacred at the depths of the sacred traditions of the world. And I feel like, we need to get that hurdle out of the way so we can understand this serpent is sacred in every religious tradition of the world.
I mean, there's a lot of contention between the Protestant, Catholic community, You know what I mean on that idea?
Oh, on the serpent.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things you're going to see.
But why do they all use the serpent symbol?
Yeah.
Whether you go to remote village in tribal India, right, or you go to Mexico, it's like the symbol of the healing and the doctor.
Right. I mean, so I
and
mean,
it's pre-Moses too, by the way.
So there's this.
Sumerians also have the same symbol for healing.
Yeah, so there's pre-established kind of like instituted prejudice against anybody who thinks a serpent is holy in any way. You know what I mean? Like if you're from, but then we have to really like, okay, we're like kind of have any respect for native traditions as we know about the pervading idea of the hero twins and all this stuff. Then we have to give some credence that, you know, the serpent was considered a sacred being. You know, one explanation we have from the Peru is that the serpent was considered the lord of the underworld.
In Peru, South America.
Yeah, South America.
Like Vasuki.
The jaguar was considered the lord of the earth, while the eagle was overlooking the heavens. Now, and as far as like this belief of the serpent controlling the underworld, the ocean, it's pretty much something that's very consistent through the Americas that I noticed. It's also in Polynesia. You have, of course, we know about Kanaloa.
So, but there's no snakes in Hawaii, so how could they?
Right, but usually we have the form of either octopus, eel, or
mo'o,
a
lizard.
But yet also in Melanesia we have the same deity by the same name, and he alternates frequently with fish, with a snake. He's frequently a snake, a deity of some type, you know. And as far as that goes, but I mean, not to get too much into the Polynesian thing. I mean, that's kind of like sidetracking.
Another show.
For right now, no. I mean, I'd like to mention more about the whole idea of this deity, you know, who is considered like, in Fiji, we know that he's considered the supreme being and his altered form. He comes in a human form, and amongst the Fijians, and he has pastimes and amongst the Fijian people and all this stuff, but they recognize him also in his form as a great serpent. And he's considered to be the supreme deity, creator of the world and all this, you know what I mean? So now if we go, you know, I mean, just briefly on that, I can come back, but going to Africa, we have the same idea with the West African, because I know I can study the diasporic African traditions, mostly like the voodoo and the offshoots of those. That's pretty widespread, you know, and so it's pretty available access, and you can see that they have the same, you know, Benin crest of the deity, for one thing, with the serpents.
In Benin, like in Central Africa.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of like the same crest as you'll see in the Egyptian, the aureus, the multi-crested crown, and things like this. Of course, that's the crest of Olokun, who's called the sea deity. You know, and this is one of the consistencies you have throughout Oceania and Polynesia, is pretty much Kanaloa in that form. He's usually considered, whether he's a fish, an eel, or snake, he's considered Lord of the Sea, Lord of the Ocean.
So Kanaloa is like the Polynesian Balarama, Sheshanaga?
I would definitely consider him like that, because we see the Tulamutin that we had the chart, you know, where we see the great Tangaro and the octopus, eight-form octopus, holding up the structure of the universe.
Oh, really?
So we have that chart, but, you know, now I was going to go back to the sea deity Olokun. So that's one of his names, Olokun. And Okun, you know, it means ocean.
So that's kind of like the Nigerian, West African.
Yeah, right. And it's been compared to words like Oceanus, ocean. So Olo means Lord. So Okun,
Olo. Bhaktivinoda Maharaj said Olo is Hari.
Right.
It's an African dialectical version of Hari. Right?
Yeah, this is. I believe that was his, you know. I mean, I won't. This is what they say. It's what I'm saying. They say Olo means Lord. I think it is connected. They say it's connected. So I mean, the Africans in West Africa are saying they're connected with Egypt languages and traditions and stuff like this. And I would, you know. And now, of course, we see that a lot of West African traditions have adopted all these Hindu deities into their art and stuff like that.
Wow.
So this is you know.
So in the past 50 years, you mean?
I don't know if it's what the time is there between that, but at least in the past, so many 50, I guess, maybe around there, But you can see that that's, part of the West African idea is that they, simulate or their traditions with the belief. Now, what I've been told, anyway, don't want to get too much into that idea, but what I've been told by others is like, okay, like the West Africans saw that the Hindu community was worshiping Lakshmi and getting money, and she was getting money, and so. But I don't believe this is the reason. I don't believe at all. I think the West Africans noticed this. We have names like for the goddess of the river goddess Yamaja, different names like that, which we can compare directly to Yamuna sometimes, and the other river god or goddess, I guess, is Agungu. And so we can compare that to, and you can see Yamaja.
Ganga, for people who don't know, is the real name for Ganges, the river.
Yamaja festival, they have her come out. She usually wears the serpent mask or like this, and she's like a mermaid form. She comes on top of this, and then she comes on top of this big float. I guess you'd call it kind of like a cart. What did they call it? I'm trying to remember that. But it's called a Ejele masquerade, and in the middle of it, there's the serpent, and he's encircling, so he's circumferencing the world, in this representation. And it's kind of like a 15-foot tall, and so that's how she's usually represented, is this mermaid type of, goddess or whatever you want to say. And so you have those similarities there. So you have the same in Olokon, the Lord of the Sea. You know what I mean? And here his crest, as we can see, was the dynastic crest for the Benin, royalty. You know what I mean? And it's still, you can see many of these. You've seen them before. You know what I mean? And they even have sometimes the Portuguese on there, but you see a lot of them are shaped with the, very same ideas they have in Egypt, which is just a multiple serpent crown. So this is why they're saying we're related with, Egyptians and stuff like this. So once again, Lord of the Sea, you know what I mean? And we have him in this form, as we know, that often we see the serpents and stuff related with him also. Going back to now, as we say, the controversy between Protestant and Catholicism and so on. So we have Western Catholicism that holds the staff, the bishop's staff, the serpent staff, representing of the authority of Jesus. This is very much similar to the caduceus staff, as we all know, because
caduceus is the medical.
Right, the medical staff.
Yeah.
And this is where we talk about the history of Christ with the Scorpios and Agathos, Diamond, and these kind of deities that were Roman, Greek, and accepted in Egypt, and the history of the Egyptian Christians worshiping Serapis and worshiping, these different deities as recognizing them as Christ, as Jesus Christ. So in the West, in the Orthodox tradition, the Eastern, we have the double serpent staff, who they say represents the healing Christ, the same nailstone that you're talking about, and that's still used as a staff in the Orthodox tradition today, even though it's Protestants especially, they distance themselves from that.
Protest
right.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see in a lot of these staffs, and sometimes there's a single bishop's staff, what do they call it, crozier, and you can see he's a plumed serpent. And in one case, you see he's holding up the worlds, and there's different. And you can see they're all plumed serpents. This is all through, and in the cathedrals, churches, European,
Catholic.
Catholic churches, but I mean all the way from, even in England, you're going to find the serpent, the plumed serpents, and the.
So it's not just a Catholic thing.
What they call the wyverns in England.
Yeah.
And right, it's not. Well, I mean, it's what's called a pagan thing, but obviously not a Catholic thing, because you find, the plumed serpents there too. Which they call the wyverns. In other words, they're serpents. You'll see them in the, amongst the facades and amongst the decor of the medieval decor, and you'll see that they actually are plumed serpents. So this is the same idea we have, of course, in the Americas. And, of course, we have this in the Vedic tradition, too, with the plumed serpent being, like, especially, about the story Takshaka, and the plumed serpents. And he's generally called the plumed serpent, and these names, like, I'm going to say the Sanskrit is, but different names in Sanskrit, Kukuta, Ahi, Kukuta, Anda, Kukuta, all these names are different names for plumed serpents. They're different, it's called snake birds. And they're famously known throughout the world. Whether in China, you're going to see them, you know what I mean? In China as well, and plus Europe, it's like we're already talking about the churches and everything, but also the stories of cockatoo, or what was that? The basilisk and the cockatrice. Those were two different types of snake birds, and these are compared in the family. Like Takshaka is in the family of Kalia. Takshaka is a very well-known Naga prince, and he takes it in the story of Maharaj Parikshit, which comes up in the beginning of, also in Mahabharata, but also in the beginning of the Bhagavad. He takes this form of a shapeshifter. He's a shapeshifter, basically. But in the Mahabharata, it's nicely described, as he's flying through the air and all this stuff. But anyway, so he's well-known prince, and he's related to serpents like Kalia, these different types of serpents.
Nagas.
Right. So, but generally speaking, so you have a plumed serpent in both places. You have a plumed serpent in the Catholic Church, and so that still is part of the Catholic Church, And
wow. So that's great. So So we talked about the sacred serpent and its connotations and connections.
That symbolism seen in the Catholic Church, that goes back to where? That goes back to, well, you could say it's like, we can actually say Asclepios and all, and the deities like that.
The Asclepios is so-called Greek god of healing, right?
Yeah. And
that's a pretty amazing whole other show, actually, because in the old days, pre-Christ, even in the early Christian era, they'd have these healing temples, and people would go there and sleep overnight, and there'd be all these serpents cruising around the healing temple, and people would have dreams while they slept there of how to cure themselves. Yeah, it's almost an almost forgotten tradition.
So, but that idea of the double serpent on the staff, you see that in the hands of Mercury a lot, and probably people don't make the relation between Hermes, Mercury, and the messengers. And
so Mercury and Hermes, the same god, but Greek and Roman versions.
Greek and Roman names.
Yeah.
And they don't make the connection that, the wand was also considered a healing wand. It was also considered to be an authoritative. It's the same idea as we see behind the Catholic dual-headed serpent wand. A staff that they use, the bishop's staff, which is also considered to be a shepherd's staff. It's just the Eastern, version of it. So that idea of the two serpents, as we talk about the deities in this Africa, from Egypt and on, and so we're talking about the Agathos demon, Agathos tiger. We know in the Orphica, what are the fragments, the Orphica fragments, or Orphica, whatever.
What is that?
That we have Heracles.
What's Orphica?
The Greek, sorry. In fact, I believe it's between, I want to say about 2nd, 3rd century BC.
Oh, okay.
And
around Alexander's time.
Yeah, probably around that time. But obviously from some earlier tradition, it would have to be. Anyway, but that idea there, you see, the name Heracles is synonymous with Kronos as the Lord who has a serpentine body with 3 heads, and along with the goddess Ananke, they encircle the primordial cosmos, the cosmic globe.
Chronology of Chronos.
The cosmic
of time.
Right.
Chronicles. Chronos.
Oh. Okay, just a second.
Peter's like, guys, just click OK.
Yeah, no. This is what you do. Let's do this. Get out of here for a second. You're doing something.
Still recording. Hey, so, yeah. So I wanted to read something that kind of brings us back to...
Oh, wait, let me finish what I was saying.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then the whole idea is supported in the West African, easily. So we know it's the same thing because we see it in the Egyptian idea of and we see the pine cone, which is tipped, which we know Dionysus had the pine cone and all that. That was his staff.
Dionysus had the pine cone.
Dionysus had the pine cone staff. And we can see the dual serpent staff. Now, this is like we say, for another time, another subject. But the West African had the same idea with Dambala and Ayurveda. Now, I've researched these names, and people say, well, that was a tribal name, but all the references I can see refer to somebody who is submerged, some being submerged, Vedo meaning being submerged, or wet, basically, And these 2 deities you see also entwined with the tree. That's how they're pictured on the voodoo diagrams. I want to say the voodoo bebes, they call them, the voodoo bebes. They show the 2 serpents either on a cross form or just, crossing each other like this in the same way, representing these 2. So it's the same idea, the Greek idea of the 2 serpents encircling the world, the 2 serpents being a tree. Dambala Vedo is considered to be the supreme creator being. He's often syncretized with Jesus as sacrificer, redeemer, with Christ.
Dambala, African tradition.
Dambala is African, the West African tradition. The Yoruban, I want to say Yoruban, they say Dahomey. I guess that's maybe that's not. Maybe I don't know, but the idea is the same, and they're considered generally a fair color. So white colored things are often for them, and stuff like this, and so on and so on, And this is coming from a dark African people, and it's not about. I mean, as we know that, who's that? Muba, you've heard of him. He was at the Dogon scholar who said that, he kind of like poo-pooed the whole thing, like saying, they're worshiping certain white serpents and stuff like that.
So he was bringing it down to some kind of body-based racial thing.
Right. He was bringing it down, even though he was himself, he was kind of a mystical leader himself, you know what I mean?
But he was a Western scholar.
Yeah, but he wasn't bringing it down. He was saying that they're beings from other worlds, but they're not
godly.
They're not divine.
They're just
right. And they've created this into this idea of divinity. But he probably didn't have the chance to compare the fact that this is a pretty steady idea. If you're going from the caduceus forms, as you're going to see in Egypt, Greece, and the deities that are related with him. This supports the whole idea that this tradition was definitely interrelated with Egypt and Greece and all these things, And of course, you have the Wajet. That's another thing.
Yeah, that's an Egyptian serpent deity.
Right, the Egyptian serpent deity. Of course, that was the Wajet from the wasp scepter, And so we know that the wasp scepter, wasp means to be well, to have health, to have life, so these things were like definitely related for a long time, and they had the serpent symbolism for a long time. And you can go really, really into depth in that serpent symbolism because it's pretty much found all through Greece and all through, in the healing traditions and things like this, and the 2 serpents emerging from the caskets, and So you get a lot of these ideas, and then the symbolism that follows that, just the three, you know what I mean? Like, and you see in the staff, like the Dionysus, the retinue of Dionysus and Sylvanus, they're carrying these staffs. Basically, these are the same ideas, same thing as the bishop's staff, because we see in the bishop is saying what they're representing. Sorry. They're representing the church. They're representing the authority of God, and the staff represents the authority of God, right? And we can see that their belief is that the cherubic they represent these cherubic beings and
angelic
these angelic messengers of God. And we were talking about the four evangelists are probably the main ideal example that they're pointing to. And we see their symbolism as their cherubic forms. They're, got horns, one's got an eagle's head, one's got a lion's head, and they got wings, and sometimes they're wheeled. So they're representing all these different angelic orders of cherubim, Ophanim, as chariots, as messengers, and things like this, and as bearers of God also. So, and if we see that, the biblical terminology, the biblical compared Hermes, like the speakers, like of the Bible, I'm going to say they compared, who was it that they compared with Hermes? They compared Peter with Hermes because he was the main speaker. And so you can see this tradition of messenger coming down from Hermes Mercury into these, because they're related with Sylvanus, the staff holders. They all are fathered by Hermes, and Pan's fathered by Hermes, and they're all these cherubic forms, and that's correlated right directly in the biblical idea of the four evangelists. What's that? What? Oh. Okay, that's right.
I just had a scary thought.
What is it?
Positive stuff. Hello. So, going back to the American Indian sacred traditions, there was a great scholar, John Walker, I believe his name was. James R. Walker, and he lived with the Sioux for I think around 15 years or so, starting in the mid-1890s to 1912, and he recorded all these traditions from the people who practiced these traditions for hundreds, thousands of years, passed down from their ancestors. And so what did he record in terms of their conception of the Supreme Lord? And I'm just there's bullet points here. So he found out that Wakantanka, who is one of the supreme gods' names in the Sioux Lakota tradition. Wakantanka is their supreme lord, creator being. Actually higher than the creator, but that's another topic. But he's God, basically. And according to the so-called shamanic or mystical tradition, Wakantanka has two secret names, and they're Skan and To. So To is spelled T-O, so I believe that's how it's pronounced. And this being, Wakantanka, his secret identity name is Skan. He's blue in his hue. His complexion is blue. As you know, Krishna is a supreme being, is also blue. And the other secret name, To, T-O, what is the exact English translation of the word To for God's other secret name? Means blue, right? So from two sides we have God is blue within the most secret, sacred traditions of the Lakota people. So it's not a coincidence. It's not just one time they have a random, we have this blue kind of thing thrown in. It's no, at the deepest levels, at the most esoteric levels of their tradition, God is blue. So the concept of the blueness of God is thus reinforced twice at the most advanced mystical levels of Lakota religion and spirituality. Then we have the word Kan, K-A-N, in the name Wakantanka, and it represents God. So anytime you hear in the Lakota language the word Kan, it means something sacred and divine.
Well,
and as we know,
I don't know.
Well, this is according to James R. Walker's research with the ancient medicine men and women.
Oh, that's what he says.
What they told him in his, what he wrote in his book.
The name Khan.
Yeah. And so this is from just to be for anyone who wants to go online and check it
sorry.
out. The book is called Lakota Belief and Ritual by James R. Walker. It's the James R. Walker collection, freely available online.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and so then what else do they say? Kan, Kana, Kanha, Kane is the name of God throughout the ancient world.
Wow.
Kan of the ancient American Indian religion also has an eagle. His name is Wakinyan. And he's not only just some eagle, he's the favorite companion of Wakantanka. And as we know, Vishnu is always associated with Garuda, the divine eagle, right? And Kanha, the ancient Vedic Vaishnava Indic tradition, has eagle Garuda as his favorite companion. Then Kane, as you know, Professor Kalia is actually the world's leading expert in Vedic connections to Polynesia, whether he denies it or not.
I am denying.
And I've been to a lot of scholars with all kinds of, I've been to a lot of scholarly conferences, and I've been around, and nothing is as depth and scholarly as his research. So then Kane of the ancient Polynesian tradition has a white albatross, Nukea Nuia Kane, as his favorite companion.
Yeah.
So the global presence of Kane, Kana, Wakantanka, he's blue, he has an eagle, is present globally.
Right.
And that's within the Lakota tradition as recorded by James R. Walker.
So, closing statements. Anyway, so you were talking about Khan. I didn't want to get into it. It sounds too complicated, But basically, we have the same ideas, the same primary and secondary meanings, from the Sanskrit all the way to Native American traditions. I have studied it. In the words of, paraphrasing Sir Monet Williams, he says, I believe Sanskrit will be found to be the key to all, understanding all the world's languages. This is what he says. This is back.
For our audience, can you tell us who that is?
Sir Monet Williams, of course. He was called Sir Monet Williams. So
what era was he?
Yeah, what?
Early 1800s.
He was 1800s. He was born in Bombay, India.
Oh.
So he was a native in India, but he was a British citizen. He was British. He was basically European, British, born in Bombay. But he had a lifelong chance to study all the traditions and everything of India, and of course work with different Sanskrit scholars like Max Muller and all this. Sir Monet Williams, so nice. He had to be named twice, I guess, in some places. But he's came up with these conclusions, as well as Mueller came up with a lot of similar conclusions. Anyway, the point is, taking a hint from not only Sir Monet Williams, but others like Sir William Jones. There's so many countless different, that you can name that have pointed out these connections that the Americans, the possibility of cross-continental, or, I guess, like you say, from other languages, you know what I mean? Or these things with similarities, or anyway, uniformities, of a certain communication that once existed, a universal communication system that, I guess, in some cases you can look to a place like Babylon and say, well, here we have it in a biblical idea, or the Babylon tradition, right. And we were talking about the serpent thing. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention was that, sorry, it's Babylon, not to jump, but, of course, Jesus on the cross. Now, this is how he's often compared with the same sacrifice of the Nehustan and all those things like that. So,
what's Nehustan?
The Nehustan? Oh, that's the brazen serpent that was put upon the Nehustan. But right, so Sir William Jones pointed this out, this connection, just to go back to that.
God, that guy must have been a total Hindu fanatic. Huh?
Well, he wasn't really a Hindu fanatic. He was actually kind of anti-Hindu.
But he couldn't deny the proofs he saw.
Right, but he couldn't deny all the stuff that he had seen and everything like that. So, but he really didn't take it as Hindu language. He kind of considered it he's kind of at that point, kind of co-opting it as an Aryan language. And
so he was like one of the predecessors of the Aryans, or a race.
Yeah. And so he was kind of like sticking that in his dictionary without any real references. And you can kind of notice, so it's a little bit on the sly. As you can see that where
the
he
poison pill.
Right. Because in all the other cases, he's giving references.
Oh, interesting.
And all this, but when he puts stuff like that, and you notice that there's no reference or anything. It's just so
you heard it here first.
Yeah. You can read the dictionary if you like. So, Williams Sanskrit Dictionary. Anyway, I won't suggest it. Really. I mean, take someone else's word. Yeah. But, the idea that was so I took that hint, and I could see that there is a similarity between these names. I just didn't want to get into the very complicated, in-depth about the similarities between names like Tane, Tangaroa, Tane. In Polynesia, generally speaking, it's called Tane. And some people say, well, Kane, Kana, which is Krishna's name for Kana. We were pointing out the word Kana means to be, be a particle, a grain, an atom, to be very small. Kana also means to be sweet. You see the words candy and stuff like this, and to be light.
Candy.
To be light, and to be bright, to be cheerful. These are all kind of primary meanings of the different of kana. So this is Krishna's name, right? Also, he's called Kana because these are the things he means. A little one, he means a tiny. But you see that in the name applied Kaniya.
Krishna Kaniya.
Yeah, Krishna Kaniya. Kaniya means little brother in Sanskrit, and we find that the same idea in Polynesia with little brother, is there.
So why would God be called a little brother?
Right, but
for those who don't know why.
We're talking about the etymology here. We're talking about the words Taina.
Well, the reason is because Krishna is the little brother of Balarama.
Right.
And those are the hero twins. They're found throughout the whole North and South American indigenous traditions. They have the same colors, same attributes, same companions, same so-called legends, actually Leelas, right?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying these similarities definitely exist.
So how did all these peyote-smoking cavemen come up with the same things all over the world?
But I'm just to compare the names though of Taina and so that's usually the name for younger brother, and so he's compared to be the younger brother. Sometimes it's called the younger brother of God. Sometimes it's called the younger brother of Kanaloa, younger brother of Tangaroa. So Tangaroa is evidently considered, especially I've noted in the Maori, that they strongly, emphasize the elder brother as Tangaroa compared to, the younger brother.
So is Kanaloa and Tangaroa the same? And one's the supposed Hawaiian name for them?
Yeah, they're the same names, but throughout most of Polynesia, you don't find the name Kane used. You find the name Tane used.
But then T and K are interchangeable.
Yeah, they're interchangeable, but if you're relating them like in a wider sense with Malay, Polynesian, and ultimately going to Sanskrit, it remains within the T sound, because when you have that like offspring and all this stuff, this belongs to the word Tana, and you'll see that word in the word in the Tamil, Tamar, meaning son, daughter, all this. So it's the same idea in Polynesia, Tama. In other words, this is related directly to something that it's interchangeable, but when you do, it's very closely related, the two words. In fact, in some places, they're actually sort of interchangeable with almost the same meaning, but not quite, you know what I mean? But in a primary sense, it's a T word, Tama. This is why I didn't want to get into all this from Sanskrit, because you can see that in the word, like I said, the Tamil, which they consider is probably one of the most influence of the Malay Polynesian, because that's considered one of the Southern Indian and Sanskrit, especially when I was looking at the Champa,
in Vietnam.
Yeah, the Vietnam Champa, and talking about the Southern Indian, not the Champa, but I'm sorry, that was one, but Malay Bahas too. They're considering their influences. One source is talking about the influences, earliest influences of
Bahas means language or something?
Bahas, Malay Bahasa.
Like in Bengali.
So they say South Indian and Sanskrit, and so you can see that kind of, if there's a relation there between the kama. So in Hawaii we have kama for child. It's where in most other places, in Fiji, even you have the word tea being used to mean the same thing. Yeah, and it's not just for child; it's for father, it's for relative, and a lot of times and stuff. But basically, we see the words tama, kama interchange in Polynesia. You're talking about child of some type, But you'll see like the word tanaka, tanata, which we see the word means mankind. And Kanaka in Hawaii means mankind. So we're talking about specifically a masculine, indication when you're talking Tane or Kane. So when the god Tane or Kane talk about, you're talking specifically masculine, because it's related to this, as far as you can see, the Sanskrit idea of that being the progenitors and all this stuff, or the main deity who's responsible for it all. So you find that same idea in Sanskrit with the same the Tanaya words, these kind of words, Tanu, Tanaya, son, all the same, as the idea of being a progenitor, being the person who's, making succession.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, like the Sanskrit word, ananta, means unending, and so this topic is unending, and we actually, when we started this, we both said, maybe 30, 40 minutes, and I think we're going on 2 hours. So what I wanted to ask Professor Kalia in closing, and I know he has so much more to say, and that's why, by the mercy of the Lord, we will be back with more episodes. But I just wanted to say and ask Professor Kalia, so why is it that all over the world, we could talk about so many commonalities, just focus on the hero twins. Was it a coincidence that so-called medicine men and women, just came up with all this and it matched somehow? Or was there a time when those hero twins really came down to earth, as is described in the Vedic scriptures, Krishna and Balarama, Ram, Lakshman, they descended on this earth and engaged themselves with humanity?
Well, that's
did that happen are these legends based on past experiences they had, or did some guys happen to go to India, or did some Indians from East India come to America, or were these transcendental experiences by the same supreme divinities that came down to earth and interacted with all the different beings and creatures? Because as we know, Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master, who we have to thank for everything we know, basically pointed out repeatedly that Krishna comes even into the ant communities. He's there in the bird communities. There's avatars of God. And then one time Srila Prabhupada's walking in what was called Bombay then, now it's Mumbai. And as he was turning to go back, U-turning to go back along towards the temple, this tree full of birds just burst out into bird song. And Prabhupada stopped and he said, they're all glorifying the pastimes of Lord Krishna. And from a mundane perspective, you just think, they're a bunch of birds and it's like morning time and they're waking up. But according to Srila Prabhupada, he's like, no, they're glorifying Krishna to each other, And so for me, it's like the Lord is involving and descending himself as an avatar into the ant community, the bird community. And why not every so-called tribe or ethnic group also having a direct connection, right? What do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah, would you agree with that? That the Lord interact with all these people rather than being some man-made thing in some exclusive part of the world?
I mean, there's different ways to look at it. I mean, you can say, well, but evidently this is what people believe. Evidently, people had a, theological background to their history more so than anything else. I mean, no matter how you look at it, it's way beyond animism. Things like this. Now, whether I can say if the Lord did this or that, I can't say those things. I'm not. All I can say is that the evidence shows that this is what people really believed. And so I'd have to give at least something credit that it's like, how do you come up with these ideas? Where do you find these identical sort of traditions and beliefs that are going on without some type of, I don't know. Does it belong basically to the human heritage of the soul or the psyche? That's what you have to think. I mean, that's the only thing you can think of. And some of it, we might even say, is just really knowledge, even though it's not considered by mainstream science or academics at the time. It really is, like something that Native people did around the world, kind of like have a uniform idea of beliefs about, and you can get down to details about that as we went through before, But, so, as far as like the deities go, yeah, there's a very uniform idea. If we're going to have any understanding of Native cultures around the world, African or that outside of the main traditional religious, Judeo-Christianity, Islam sort of dominated, influence, or whether even if that's Buddhism or even today also, or if we're going to have any understanding of that, then we have to give respect that there was a reason that they gave respect to this, just like we see in Africa before the pre-Christian idea was just, again, attributed to Christ, as it is still active in the Catholic Church today. So if that's okay for the Catholic Church to do that and to turn a blind eye to, these are, what do we call ancient beliefs pretty much around the world, and for any understanding of respect to be given in the information that's given, we can understand in some cases, it's directly is an expression of the supreme embodiment of the Supreme God. We understand that, and it's identical with the Eastern in many senses.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even the very word Catholic means universal, if I'm correct. So it's like the universal truth, reality.
So it's hard to say, well, how could anyone come up with these ideas? I mean, some of these ideas are utterly prehistoric.
Yeah.
And you have to say to yourself, and I mean, these traditions range from anything from, the Supreme Being down to just mystical ideas and traditions and beliefs about.
Yeah, because people kind of get lost in the weeds to terminologies and stuff.
So it's hard to deny the fact, that there's too many similarities when you're really looking at it. And I mean, just as that we have grown up with different prejudices, we've grown up with, and it's hard sometimes to remove these things. I understand, but we have a lot of traditions that did not want to see that equality with the Christian deities and stuff like this.
It's seems like every tradition has that problem. I guarantee you, if we posted something online, choose any of these different traditions, Christian, Islam, Hindu, Buddhist, and said this is the supreme truth above all the rest of them, we got like hundreds of people, right on. And hundreds of people like, oh, what the hell's wrong with you? But then if we try to say, like, actually, within all these traditions is the seed of the original truth directly from God, then people feel, threatened by it. So we're in a strange situation where a lot of the Hindu community thinks we're like watering down their tradition by saying like, oh, you can find the same divinities within Hinduism, within these other traditions, and so they're not that interested. And then the other traditions, especially the Christian, Islamic ones, look at as if you're some kind of stealth Hindu, agent trying to prove that their religions are actually just, watered down versions of Hinduism. And it's like, no, we're not trying to promote or denigrate either of these traditions. We're trying to point out the truth that's at the foundation of all God-centered traditions.
What appears to be the truth for people, at least. If we're going to take a look, a re-examination of these traditions, there's a lot of people today that they're looking for spiritual things, they're looking for mystical things, they're looking for supernatural things. We understand that. And there's a lot of condemnation behind that. You're looking for some pseudo-spiritual, pseudo-mystical, you must be some kind of, nut to think like that. I mean, there are this, but separate from the New Age, and things like that. So, also, you can, I guess you can, but anyway, they're looking for something. They're looking for some kind of thrill, some kind of excitement in this thing. It's not just a spiritual answer always. What happened?
Throughout all this research, I'm speaking for myself here, and what's funny is, so I wrote this book, right? Published 2012, Serpent, Eagle, Lion, Dis, and I don't say this is the gospel, God-given truth, but I found so many incredible things that cannot be denied in there, that any honest researcher, whether they're theist or not, cannot deny the validity of. But I remember there'll be some errors in there, wrong terminologies used, and there'll be people who will find little error like that, and then there'll be all these amazing, undeniable truths in their face. But then they'll focus like flies on trash instead of swans or lotus flowers that grow out of the mud. And they'll look at that one little typo or something to try and discredit the whole thesis, right? And so the fact is, there's such a wealth of treasure here, and we are all just equally God's children, no matter our race, our sexual identity, our age, our religious identity. God, we're all equally His children, and this knowledge is available to any of us with a sincere heart and the time to put into it. And so I urge anyone interested in this to research for themselves. Take the clues that Professor Kalia and I have shared, look into it. We're not saying, believe us, we're the supreme acharyas and gurus. No, we're saying, hey, check out this information we've been intrigued by for decades. That's totally in line with the Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, the teacher, the wise elderly, or the wise counsel of the wise people, and Shastra, the accepted scriptures, right? And we'll take those as our template, and we find those parallels throughout human history. And, it's an invitation. That's what we're inviting you all to look for yourself, and you will be amazed to find the presence and the interplay of God throughout human history, because the rise of civilization started through what they call religion. And this is not me saying it. This is the modern mainstream theory. For decades, they said agriculture is what first inspired people to gather together and start civilization. But that theory is no longer valid according to mainstream society. What do they say? They say they've reached the same conclusion that the ancient sacred tradition said. Human civilization began when they centered themselves on God. God and the interaction between humanity and God is actually the origin of civilization, or I should say civilizations and religions throughout history. We have a sacred heritage that's common for all of us. We're all equally loved by the Lord, and take advantage of that. That's what this human life form is about. And the information in this so-called information age, are we in the post-information age? I don't know. Well, whatever. It's like we could sit here right now, take any topic, look it up. So do it. Aloha, namaste.
That's it.
Om Tatastu. Amen. Ameen. Hallelujah. Haribol.
Wow.
Thank you. Jai. Saraswati Ma. Jai Gurudev. Think you could have done more?
I don't know what else I could have done.
Remember
I
that
guess.
story? Like he wrote all the Vedas and Mahabharata, and then he was still feeling like he didn't complete his mission.
Right. Well, actually, we haven't completed the mission. We mentioned something about God being blue. We mentioned a little bit about that.
You said a lot. You said a lot.
But, right. So I think we did say enough. Really, in all honesty. So, at the same time...
It's funny how Ganesh got all, after the sunset, all whited out.
Yeah, faded out.
But I think it represents, like, the effulgence is so bright.
I don't think we have enough pictures to cover this stuff. But,
Google them.
yes,